Hello again, and welcome to another Maths Literacy session. Today we're going to be looking at solving problems in context. So we're going to look at the types of exam problems that you're most likely to encounter. Now, many of my students will tell me that it's not the maths that they struggle with in the exams. They don't always understand what the question is asking of them. You see, when the problem comes, there are lots of words, and you've got to try and decipher the maths that is hidden in those words. So we're going to make sure today that you look carefully at the problem and find the maths within the question so that you can answer the question correctly. Let's move straight to our first question today. Question number 1 says that the table below shows the area, the population, and the gross domestic product, or GDP, per province in South Africa during the years 2007 and 2008. Remember, GDP is all the money earned in that province from services or from selling products that they've made. It's the total accumulation of money that the province has made over that period. So the table says that the area and population and GDP per province during 2007, that's just the heading for the table. And below you can see they've given us the provinces, they've given us area in square kilometers, they've given us a population total, and the GDP in millions of rands. In other words, the figure over here has still got another 6 zeros after it. That's why they've rounded it off into millions of rands. And there's our table. Right, if we go further, we'll have a look and see what the questions ask. I always tell my students, go and read the question once you've looked at the table or information given, and then come back to the table and see if you can answer the type of thing that they're looking for. So let's read the questions here. It says, according to the Agricultural Research Council, 80% of South Africa's land surface area is used for farming. However, only 11% of the farming land is suitable for the planting of crops or arable land. 3.2 million hectares of the farming land in the Free State is suitable for the planting of crops. And again, that's named as arable land. And then we have question A, which is really the question that is being asked of you. This is what you're wanting to answer. It says, calculate the total area in kilometers squared of land that is used for farming in South Africa. All right, so what are the important words here that we need? Calculate, obviously we're going to have to do some mathematics. What is it that they want us to calculate? It's this thing here, the total. Let's circle that word. That's an important word. Total means we're going to have to add some stuff up because we want to get to a total number. And what is that we have to add? Well, here we have another very important word, area. They also want us to know that we want to find the land that is used for farming. So we've got to find a specific type of land. Now at this point, I suggest to my students, go back to the information that you were given. So let's go back and look at that table. We can see that we are needing the total area. We're not going to be interested in the column on population, nor the column that tells us the GDP at this stage. And we're needing the total area, and we can see that we've got all the different provinces here on our left. So we're going to have to add up this column of all the areas of the provinces to get a total. Now, I always tell my students at this stage, there are a lot of numbers to add up in something like this column. And it's very easy to make a mistake. Of course, if you get the wrong answer, you're going to lose a mark in the exams for not getting the correct total. The sad thing is you're losing a mark not because you can't do the mathematics, but because you've been inaccurate. And even 1 mark out of the 4 marks for this question is a loss of 25% simply because you've been inaccurate. It's very easy to make a mistake on the calculator. And I suggested to my students that if you're going to use the calculator to add up a long column with many values, use the stats mode on your calculator. This way, you can ensure that you've done all the values correctly and you make it a little bit easier for yourself to ensure good accuracy. Let's see how to use our calculator to add up the values. Right, we're going to go firstly to stats mode, so that's option 2, and using option 1, we've got a little table where we can plug our values in. Let's start at the top here. We've got 129,370. That's our first entry. Then we've got 169,580. And we put it in. 92,100. Then we've got 361,830. 129,480. And let's scroll down for the last couple of values. 116,320. 17,010. 79,490. And the last value is 123,910. So now we've put in all our values. And we can check. There are 9 entries. Do we have 9 provinces? Yes. So we can almost guarantee that we have been accurate. If you want to, you can even go and quickly read through the numbers and check that you've put in the right numbers. This will ensure a much better accuracy in the examination. We now need our total, so we're going to get out of our table entry mode, and we're going to go to the stats mode. And of course, we're interested in option 3 here, which says sum. There, we've got 2 options. We don't want the total squared. We're just wanting the sum of all our data entry points. So there we go, and it gives us an answer of 1,219,090 square kilometers. Let's write that down quickly so we've just got that value in. I'm going to go right down to the bottom and extend my page, and we're just going to put the value in here so that we have it for ourselves. Right. Get our calculator back. 1,290,000. Sorry, that's 1. Let's just erase that. 1219090 is what we're wanting. 1219090. All right, so it's 1,219,090 square kilometers. Right, let's go back and look at the question now, because that was only part of what they wanted. They told us we need the total area, but of the land that is used for farming. Well, remember in our question, we had some information. It said that 80% of South Africa's land surface is used for farming. So we want to know if the total land area has been given, and we've already worked that out, then we can say that 80%. That's the land that's used for farming. So this value, we've got to find 80% of the total area. So that's a simple sum. Remember, 80% of is multiplication. 1,219,090 square kilometers. This is the sum that we need to do. On your calculator, you can translate 80% into 0.8 as a decimal. If you're not sure how to do that, simply take the 80 and divide it by 100. Remember, percentage is always 100. And there you can see we've got the answer, 0.8. Saying 80% of means we've got to multiply, so we press the multiplication, and we're going to multiply it by the previous answer, the total land area that we had found, 1,219,090 square kilometers. And there we have an answer, 975,272. Let's write it down. 975,272 square kilometers. Remember in the exams that you do need to put units down every single time for your final answers. So we've now answered question A. We've got a total land area that is used for farming in South Africa. That takes us to our next question. Question B says, calculate the percentage of land in South Africa suitable for planting crops. In other words, we're looking for arable land that is found in the Free State. It's another percentage question, so you've already done one of these and you should know the process by now. But now be careful again. It's very easy just to say, well, let's calculate 80% of our previous figure. Let's go and check again what information they gave us right at the beginning. They said to us, however, only 11% of the farming land is suitable for the planting of crops, arable land. That means it's 11%, not of the total land that we have been given, but 11% of the 80% that we were using earlier. So we've got to now find 11% from the answer that we got in question A. You see, again, it's not the maths that's so difficult, it's understanding the question. It's easy to use the wrong figures. Well, we know we need 11%, but we don't want the total land, the 1.2 million that we had earlier. We need this figure, 975,272. 11% of 975,272. And what does that answer give us? Well, back to the calculator. 11% is 11 divided by 100, or you could just straight away go to 0.11, and we're multiplying 975,272. There it is, 107,279,92. 107, let's just check it again, 279, and we've got some decimal points there, 0.92. Again, this is an answer in square kilometers. Now that we have the total arable land in the country, we can go and look at what the figure is for the Free State, because we're going to need that figure to compare to the total in the country. Again, looking at our question, they gave us that information right in the beginning. They told us that we had 3.2 million hectares of farming land in the Free State that was suitable for the planting of crops. So let's go and use that figure. We know that we've got 3.2 million. However, the units are different to the units that we've already calculated, which were kilometers squared. But that's why they gave us this conversion over here. They've told us that 1 hectare is 0.1 kilometers squared. So we can do one of two things here. We can either convert the hectares to kilometers squared, or we can convert the kilometers squared to hectares. It doesn't matter which one you do in the exam, as long as you convert them so that they are both the same units, because only that way can you work out the percentage for the last part of the question. I'm going to convert our kilometers squared into hectares. Notice, kilometers squared is a smaller unit than hectares. That's 0.01, whereas this is 1. So to turn this figure into hectares, I'm going to have to divide by the 0.01, which will give me a bigger answer for hectares. So we're going to take this and go 107,279,92, and we'll divide it by the 0.01. Well, that's easy enough to do because all we're really doing is moving our decimal places 2 units. Doing that will give us an answer of 107,279,92 hectares, or 10,727,000, let's rewrite that a little bit neater here, 727,992 hectares. That's the total arable land in the nation in hectares. We've got 3.2 million hectares in the Free State. To work out a percentage now, we're going to take this figure and divide it by the total figure and then get the calculation. So 3.2 million is 3,200,000. Divide that by 10,727,992, and that will give us an answer of, let's go to the calculator, 320,000 divided by 10,727,992, and we get a total of 0.298, or multiplying by 100 for percentage, a percentage of 29.8. So that's 29.8%. That tells us that nearly 30% of the Free State's arable land that is used for planting crops is, or 30% is found in the Free State in relation to the whole country. The Free State is a rather large farming area, and so many of the crops that we have are found in that part of our land. All right, let's move on to question number 2. Now, question number 2 also follows on from our table and gives us some extra information. It says the following information about the Free State was given in the 2007-2008 South African Yearbook. We've got the capital there, the home languages, and we can see Sesotho, 64.4% speak it, Afrikaans, 11.9%, and isiXhosa is 9.9%. They also give us the population figures for the Free State, 2,965,000, and that was done mid-year population estimate 2007. Area given again in square kilometers, and the percentage of the total area of South Africa. So the Free State takes up 10.6%. Here again we have the gross domestic product, 75,827 million rand. And that's also given as a percentage figure. In other words, the 5.5% is this total figure here in relation to the whole country. Well, to the question. It asks us to calculate the number of people in the Free State whose home languages were not Sesotho, Afrikaans, or isiXhosa during the period 2007 to 2008. Well, we've been given 3 lots of percentages. Obviously, if that was all the speakers that there were, the total should come to 100%. Let's go and add this total up and see what we do get. 64.4%, and then we had 11.9 and 9.1, plus 11.9 and plus 9.1. Adding up those 3 percentages, we get 64.4 plus 11.9 plus 9.1. A total of 85.4%. We can see here that we haven't got to 100%. That means there's still a certain percentage of people that speak neither of those 3 languages. So let's go and work out what percentage does not speak any of those 3. Well, it's 100%. Subtract the total, which is 85.4%, and that gives us an answer of 100 subtract 85.4, and we get a total of 14.6%. So 14.6% of the Free State population speak a language other than a Sesotho, Afrikaans, or isiXhosa. Let's move to the question number 2, or 2.2. It says, if a person is randomly selected from the Free State, determine the probability that the home language of this person is not Afrikaans or isiXhosa. This question relates to probability, so we're taking another section of work. Remember that probability is also measured in percentages, so we can use a percentage figure here quite conveniently. We were given the two percentages for the Afrikaans and the isiXhosa, that was 11,9 and 9,1. So here we want to find out how many people, or what percentage of people, would not speak one of those two languages. So adding up these two values, and we can just add up this in our head quickly, but if you're not sure, use your calculator. This gives us a total of 21%. That means 21% of the population speak those two languages. Of course, we want to know which ones don't, so we've got to subtract that from the total, which is 100%. Again, it's 100 minus 21, and that gives us an answer of 79% probability. You could also have given this answer as simply 0,79, which is quite permissible when you're speaking of probabilities. Question 2.3 says, surveys have shown that 60% of the inhabitants of the Free State are employable. This means that the workforce is 60% of the total population of the Free State. Identify any two possible reasons why 40% of the inhabitants are not employable. Well, here's a question that relates not to mathematics at all, but to a little bit of general knowledge and understanding of the area. You see, this is where the maths literacy part comes in. And you will be expected in an examination to sometimes give a reasonable answer that describes the situation you're actually using. That's why we call this solving problems in context. You would need to know a little bit about the context of the province that you're speaking about so that you could answer this question successfully. Well, let's think a moment. What kind of things would lead to people not being employed or not being employable? If we are saying that 40% do not work, why do they not work? Well, the first answer is fairly simple. Think about a population. A population goes from all the youngest people in the country to the oldest people in the country or in that province. Now, not everybody who is young can work. We don't, and we're not allowed to, employ children in the workplace. So children aged 0 to, let's say, 16 years of age, they're unemployable, but they make part of that total figure. So here's one reason straight away. You could say that some of the population are children. Others might be too old to work. So the elderly, or those who may have retired already, they don't work. So they're part of the population, but they'd fall into that 40% that are no longer employable. Then there might be sick people. There might be people who cannot be employed because they don't have a work permit, for example, but they're living in the Free State. And because they don't have all the documents, things like the ID books, the work permits, etc., they can't be employed because companies won't employ people that don't have those things. So you could mention things, ID documents. You could also say that perhaps the people who are employing, the people, for example, who own companies or are working on farms and say they need people, there aren't enough of those around. So it might be that the area, the Free State that we're talking about, for example, don't have enough employable areas. So the companies will only employ a certain number of people. There's not enough work available. That sometimes happens, especially in the economic climate that we're facing right now. Many companies have closed, so they can't afford to pay laborers. And so there are unemployed people who are sitting around. They could be employed, but they don't actually do any work simply because they can't find any. So there's several reasons that we now have that we could have reasoned out simply by thinking a little bit. It's important when you do these questions with your teacher and you're discussing or learning this work that you do discuss the impact in our nation with regards to this type of question. This will help give you information to use to answer such questions successfully. Now, part B of this question says, According to the Labour Force survey of March 2007, the official unemployment rate in the Free State was 26.4% of the workforce. Calculate the number of unemployed people in the Free State at the time of this survey. Well, we were told that 60% was what made up the workforce. And we're going to need to go back to our original information that we were given. That's right back over here. Sorry, where's it gone? There we go. Right in the beginning, in the information they gave us, they told us that there was a population figure of 2,965,600. So that's the figure that we're going to need. Let's just put a circle around it so you can see nicely. 2,965,600. Going back down, I'm going to put that figure into my question over here. $2,965,600. So that's the population that lives in the Free State. We need to find 60% of that because 60% make up the workforce. So back to our calculator, 60%, so we divide by 100, and again we'll get a figure 0.6 multiplied by 2,965,600. That gives us 1,779,360. 1,779,360. So this is the workforce. That's the 60% that we're speaking about. However, our question says that 26.4% of the workforce, that means of the 1,779,000 people, are unemployed. So we've got to find 26.4% of this figure now to answer the question successfully. 26,4 of 1,779,360. And going back to the calculator, I'm just going to use that answer. Let's put it there, and we'll multiply it by the 26.4%, which is 0.264 as a percentage. And that gives us a total now of 469,751. 469,751. If you have a look again, we do have a decimal point after that figure. But remember, we're talking about people. We don't want a percentage of a person. So we're just going to round it down. And that's fine for this answer. So we're just going to use the total number of people without the decimal figure. So there we go. We've answered that question now. Let's move on to question number 3. All right, question number 3 says that Ronwin and Bronwyn are twins. They plan to celebrate their 21st birthday by having a big party. Ronwin has decided that she wants a round cake, while Bronwyn has decided to have a ring cake, as shown in the pictures below. And let's just have a quick look so we can see what we're talking about. There we go, a round, and this one has got a little bit of a ring in it. So that area in the middle is hollow. Looks a little bit like a donut. The dimensions of each cylindrical cake is as follows. Well, Ronwin's round cake has a diameter of 50 centimeters. Remember, diameter is the value across the center. So that's 50 centimeters, and height, well, we'll talk about thickness for this cake, is 15 centimeters. When we look at Bronwyn's ring cake, she has an outer diameter. In other words, the large part of the circle here, the diameter across that part is 56 centimeters. So it's slightly larger. This one was 50. Let's put it in there. And this one was 56. And the inner diameter, that's the part in the center, the part with the hole, is 18 centimeters. So this part is 18. Of course, we then have a height for this cake of 14 centimeters, or a thickness of this cake of 14 centimeters. Now, the following formula using pi is equal to 3,14 may be used. They've given us a volume formula for a cylinder. And strictly speaking, these cakes are cylinders. So we've got the volume here of pi times the radius squared times the height. We also were given the volume of a cylindrical ring, which is the type of cake that Bronwyn has over here. And here we're given that it's pi multiplied by r squared, where r is the outer radius, and little r squared, where that r is the inner radius, multiplied by the height. The total outer surface area of an open cylinder is equal to pi times radius squared plus 2 times pi times radius times height. Again, another formula that we've been given, this time for surface area. Now let's look at the question that they ask us. And you can see this one is for a whopping 10 marks. So there's going to be quite a bit of working out for this. It says, using the volume of each cake, determine which of the two cakes is better value for money if the costs of the two cakes are the same. Give a reason for your answer, showing all your calculations. Now let's analyze the question a little bit before we continue. We're going to need the volume for both cakes. So that's two sums already that we're going to have to do. We're also going to have to calculate or say whether the cake is better value compared to the other cake. They tell us that the costs for the two cakes are the same. So it doesn't matter whether you bought a round cake or you bought a cylindrical ring cake. Both cost exactly the same. What we're going to have to do is to use the volume answers to make a decision a little bit later on. Let's go back and see what we need to do to calculate volume. Well, Bronwyn's round cake is a cylinder. So volume, we know, is pi times radius squared times height. I'm going to do it over here. Pi, which we know is equal to 3,14, times the radius squared. Well, what is radius? Radius, remember, is always half the value of the diameter. So we're going to have to halve that value of 50, and we'll make that 25. So that's 25, and remember, we must square that value, multiplied by the height or the thickness of the cake, and in this case, that was 15. Let's go and do those calculations quickly. We're going to put in 3.14 for pi. We'll then multiply 25, and we need to square that value. So I'm going to put it in brackets, close the brackets, and square that value. And then we're still going to have to multiply by 15. That gives us a total of 29,437.5. 29,437.5. And remember, the answer has units again, and because we were measuring in centimeters, we're going to have to make that centimeters cubed. Remember, I've squared the unit here, so that's already centimeters squared, and I've got a thickness, so it gives me a total of centimeters cubed. Always, when we're dealing with volume, we're working with cubic units. We can go and do the same thing for the volume of our cylindrical ring. And here we're going to have to do a little bit of a subtraction sum first. Remember that here we've got pi again, 3,14, but we're multiplying by the outer radius squared. Well, we were given the outer diameter, which was 56. So we're going to have to halve that and say that's 28 squared. And then we're going to have to subtract the inner radius squared, and again we were given inner diameter, so half of that value, the 18, so minus 9 squared. And again, we must multiply that answer by the height. In this case, it was 14 centimeters. Let me extend a little bit here so we can work with a bit more space. All right, so doing our calculation, we're going to use pi over here of 3,14 again, and we're multiplying by 28 squared minus the 9 squared times 14. Let's go and do that on our calculator, and we'll clear away all this data. I'm going to start with the brackets, 28 times 28, which is 28 squared, and we'll subtract 9 squared, which we can just do in our heads again. 9 times 9 is 81. That gives us an answer of 703, multiplied by the 14 for the thickness, and lastly by our friend pi. 3,1, sorry, we just want 1, 4. There we go. Okay, we have a total volume of 30,903. 30,903, and let's just put in the decimals, 88. And again, the answer is in cubic centimeters. So going back to our question now, we can go and start answering it. We needed the volume. We said that the ring cake was 30,903,88. If we go back to the round cake, that one was 29,000 and something. Let's just quickly make sure of that figure. 29,437,5. 29,437,5, and just to put in our units. Now we're able to make a comparison. We were told that the cost for these two cakes is exactly the same. Well, a greater volume would mean that there literally is more cake available. Even though the one might look slightly different to the other, once we've done the calculations, we can accurately compare the volume of each cake. And we can see that from the figures, our ring cake is slightly larger in volume than our round cake. That means it will be better value for money. So to answer the question, we're going to say the ring cake is better value based on it having a larger volume. And we didn't need to pay more for that larger volume. Great. Now, let's move on to the next part of the question. It says that Ronwin decides that her round cake will be a fruit cake. The cake will be covered with marzipan icing on the top of the cake as well as around the sides. Determine the total outer surface area of the cake that the marzipan icing will cover. Well, now we're working with surface area. And again, if we go back to the question, we'll see that they actually gave us some information regarding surface area. We were given this formula. The total outer surface area of an open cylinder is equal to pi times the radius squared. Well, where do they get that figure from? Well, that's the area of a circle, and the cylinder is a circle at the top and also at the bottom. So this is the total outer surface area for one circle, plus 2 times pi times radius. This figure is known as circumference. That's how far it is to go around the cake times the height. Well, we need to go and use that formula to calculate the surface area for the icing that we're going to use. So let's go and put it into that question. Surface area equals pi r squared plus 2 pi r times height. And we're only needing the one circle for the cake because we're only icing the top. Now, the dimensions for Ronwin's cake, right in the beginning, were given as follows. We need the radius again, which is half of the 50 centimeters for the diameter, and our thickness or height was 15. So let's go and fill those figures into our formula. It's pi times 25 squared plus 2 pi times 25 times 15. Doing this calculation on the calculator, we've got 25 squared. I'm just going to multiply by 25 again, and multiplied by 3.14. That part gives us a total of 1,962.5. Now, what are the units for area? Centimeters squared. There we go. And we're going to multiply the next part. 2 times 3.14. 2 times 3.14. Multiplied by the 25 again. That's the r, or the radius, and multiplied by the height, 15. And that gives us a total of 2,355. Adding those two figures up, we're getting 2,355 plus the 1,962. And we get a total of 4,317.5. And again, the answer is in centimeters squared. Now we know how much icing she needs for her cake. The question now goes on to say that the twins can choose from the following two options for the catering for their party. Option 1 says that they're going to pay 120 Rand per head, that means per person, which includes the payment for the venue, but excludes the 14% value added tax, or VAT. So they're not going to have to pay for the venue, it's included in the price that is being charged per person. Option 2, however, says the following. 3,200 Rand is charged for the hire of the venue, and then a further 80 Rand per head for catering, which includes the 14%. So this figure includes VAT. The previous one did not. Analyze the two options and determine which one would be the cheaper option if 100 people in total will attend the party. And we need to show all our calculations. Well, we're going to have to do several calculations to answer this question. The first thing is, we want to know what is the total cost for option 1 for our 100 people that are coming to attend. Well, if every one person pays 120 Rand, then 100 people are going to pay 120 times the 100. So let's start over there. Option 1. That's 120 Rand multiplied by the 100 people. That gives us a total of 12,000 Rand. I've simply added on the 2 noughts to my figure 120. So it's 12,000 Rand for the party, but we've also got to go and add on the 14% VAT. Now let me show you a little trick today to help you with something like adding on VAT. Obviously, this means I've got to find 14% of this value. Now, 14% means I've got to take 14%, multiply it by 12,000. We can go and do that on the calculator quickly, and we get an answer of 0.14 times 12,000. It's 1,680. So that figure has to be added on to the 12,000. If I add it on, I'm going to get a total of 12,000 plus 1,680 equals 13,680. But that's a two-step sum, and it's a little bit easier if I do the following. Instead of finding 14% of 12,000, I'm going to multiply the 12,000 by 114%. Let me show you how that works on the calculator. Remember, 14% was 0.14. 114% is the same as saying 1.14. To show you where I get that figure, let's just take 114 and divide it by 100, and you'll see it comes out to 1.14. Now, if I multiply that 1.14 by the 12,000, watch what happens. I get my answer of 13,680 straight away, without having to go the route of adding on the value. The reason for this is that all I'm doing by keeping the 100% is I'm keeping the original amount of 12,000, and I'm then adding on a further 14%, which is exactly what VAT is. It's 14% of that value. We're not wanting to know how much the VAT is per se. We want to know the total price inclusive of the VAT. And that's why it's easier simply to multiply by 114% rather than finding 14% and then adding it back on. I hope that will be useful for you in the examinations. So now we've got a total figure for option 1 of 13,680 Rand. Let's now go to option 2, which says the following. 3,200 Rand is charged for the hire, and we're charged 80 Rand per head for the catering, which includes the 14% VAT. Well, here we'd need, and let's make another heading, option 2. We're going to take the 80 Rand that's being charged. Again, we need to multiply it by 100, and that gives us an answer of 8,000 Rand. Remember, this figure already includes the VAT, so there's no multiplying of percentage here. Added to this figure, we've got a 3,200 Rand higher venue option. So we're going to add that figure onto the amount. This gives us a total of 11,200 Rand. Now, the question wasn't so clear here in that it didn't tell us if the 3,200 also included the 14% VAT. But it would be safe to assume that it did. If you went ahead and calculated VAT on that, an examiner shouldn't be marking you wrong because of that issue in clarity in the question. So you would be, either way, you would still get your marks. But I would say, because we've got that included here, we can assume that it applies to the 3,200 as well. So now we can have a look and compare the two options. Option 1 was costing us 13,680. Option 2 was costing us 11,200. And we can now answer the question, which says, determine which one would be the cheaper option if 100 people in total attended the party. Well, we can clearly say that option 2 was cheaper. Now, many times in the examination, students do all the calculations. They've got option 1, option 2, and the teacher can see that they've done the work. However, what they forget is this last statement to tell them that option 2 is cheaper. Remember, it's no good to not answer the question that's being asked. The question says, analyze which one would be the cheaper option. You then need to put that statement down and say that this option is the cheaper option. You are guaranteed to lose a mark by not putting that sentence down. And that's really not worth it because you've done all the work for it. We can see you've done the work, but you haven't answered the question fully. So please make sure that you finalize your question by putting that final statement in. Great, so we can move on from there. And we're on to a very nice question here based on some dishwashing. Well, of course, after the party, we're going to have to go and do some dishes for the 100 guests. So let's see what happens with this question. All right, it says that Thandi washes her dishes by hand 3 times daily in 2 identical cylindrical basins. She uses one basin for washing and the dishes and then the other for rinsing the dishes. Each basin has a radius of 30 centimeters and a depth of 40 centimeters, as shown in the diagram below. Well, let's take a quick look and see what that diagram looks like. Here we have our basin. You can see they've given the 30 centimeter radius. They've also given us the 40 centimeter height of the basin. Now we've got the picture of a lovely dishwasher over here, and it says that Thandi is considering buying a dishwasher that she will use to wash the dishes daily. Firstly, point 4.1 says that we're to calculate the volume of one cylindrical basin in cubic centimeters. And they give us the formula again. Volume of a cylindrical basin is equal to radius squared times height, and we need to use pi as 3.14. So let's do that quickly. We know that our radius was given as 30 centimeters, so that's 30 squared. Our height, they said, was, let's quickly go and check again, just to make sure we get everything correct, 40 centimeters. There it is. So 40 is the height, and we've got to multiply by pi. Okay? I see they've left out our pi here. Volume equals pi times radius squared times height. And pi, we know, is 3,14. Well, it's only worth 2 marks, and that's why it's just a simple calculation. We're going to multiply on the calculator. 30 squared is 30 times 30. Again, if you want to use the squared function, you can do that with pleasure. On the new calculators, that works a lot better. Multiply by the 40, and we're multiplying by pi, which is 3,14. So we haven't got our 900 in there. Let's just put it in. A total of 113,040. That equals 113,000, sorry, 113,040. And again, it's cubic centimeters. So we've got our volume for our basin in terms of cubic centimeters. Carrying on from there, it says that Thandi fills each basin to half its capacity whenever she washes or rinses the dishes. Calculate how much water in liters she will use daily to wash and rinse the dishes by hand. And then they give us a little conversion formula that says that 1,000 cubic centimeters is equal to 1 liter. All right, well, we did have the volume for our basin, 113,040 cubic centimeters. Let's transfer it over here. 113, I'm just going to write that a little neater for us so we can read it. 113,040. And that's the volume of one basin. She fills it to half its capacity. So only half of that volume is needed in terms of actual liquid. But remember that she does have 2 basins because she uses one for rinsing and one for washing. So we've got to take that and multiply it by 2. Well, this is actually quite nice because if you halve and you multiply by 2, you're actually cancelling those 2 figures out. So in the long run, we actually just needed that figure. Now in an exam, that's a very nice gift of a question, because if you forget to do the multiplication by 2, but you had to do by half, you're still going to get the right answer. However, let me tell you, most examiners wouldn't let that one slip by, and they would want to see that you've actually done the calculation. Perhaps they would still take off a mark for not showing that you had to halve and multiply by 2. So it's safer to put it in to show the examiner that you've actually thought about what the question is asking of you. So we've got the 113,000, we multiply it by half and by 2, which means we cancel out, which means we're still at 113,000. And that again is in cubic centimeters. However, we want to know in liters, and we know that for every 1,000 cubic centimeters, we have 1 liter of water. So we need to take this figure of 113,000 and divide it by that figure of 1,000 to get our answer in liters. So taking 113,040 and dividing it by 1,000, you can go and do it on the calculator, and we've got our answer there already. Let's divide it by 1,000. It's 113,4. 04. And of course, now the answer is converted to litres. You could simply have moved your decimal point, which at this point sits here, 3 places, and you would have got the same answer. Great. So we've answered that part of the question. Let's move on to 4.3. A manufacturer of a dishwasher claims that their dishwasher uses 9 times less water in comparison to washing the same number of dishes by hand. Following on from there in 4.3.1, the question asks, how much water would this dishwasher use to wash Tandi's dishes daily? Well, we saw previously that Tandi was using 113.04 litres. The dishwasher manufacturing company is telling us they'll use 9 times less. Well, what is 9 times less of 113.04? It means we must divide this into 9. So let's go and do that on the calculator. 12.56. So the dishwasher manufacturer is claiming that his dishwasher will use 12.56 litres of water to wash the same amount of dishes that Tandi uses 113 litres of water for. That seems to be quite a good saving on water, doesn't it? The question then goes on to say, is the claim of the manufacturer realistic? Justify your answer by giving a reason. Well, here's a question where you're asked to make a judgment call. We're asking to say, is 12 litres enough to wash the dishes? Today's manufacturer of dishwasher, the answer really is that it's true. A dishwasher uses very little water. I know some dishwashers that are now using as little as 7 litres of water to wash a set of dishes. However, on the exam paper where this question came from, the examiner or the person who answered the script said that no, the answer was not realistic. And they based this on the fact that 12.56 divided by 113.04, let's quickly do that sum and I'll show you why I'm doing that sum. It gives us a factor of 11.1%. What that is telling us that they're only using 11%. In other words, they have got a 90-something or an 89% saving of water on this dishwasher. And in those days, a dishwasher probably didn't save that much. So the advert by the manufacturer saying that it saves 9 times the amount of water is actually a little bit of an exaggeration in those days. But like I say, in today's world, actually, many of the dishwashing products do, or the dishwashers actually do use this little bit of water in comparison to washing dishes by hand. Now, here's the thing in the exam. What do you do when faced with a question that has a yes-no answer and you're giving a reason? Do you lose marks by saying yes or no? And if you say no, and the answer was asking for a yes, are you going to get 0 for the answer? The answer to that question is no. You can answer either yes or no. The examiner doesn't want just a yes or no answer, however. He is far more interested in the reason for that answer. So guessing is also not going to give you your marks. I always tell my students in the tests that I do, if you just answer yes or no, you're going to get a 0 because you haven't justified your answer. And that's what the examiners are really interested. They say this always in their questions. Justify your answer by giving a reason or reasons. It's the justification for your answer that the examiner is more interested in. So if the examiner had on his script for this one that the answer was no, and he wanted a reason that was based on the fact that the percentage was such a huge drop, but you went and answered yes and said something, for example, to the fact that many dishwashers today have been designed in a way that actually uses very little water, the examiner cannot and will not mark you incorrectly. So you can be safe in saying, I've chosen an answer and I've given a reasonable justification for why I've given that answer. Well, there we have some exam type questions that we've answered today. Now remember, in the exams, you've got a lot of reading to do. Take the time to read. There is enough time in the examination to actually analyze the question carefully. Don't simply rush in to answer the question as fast as possible. It's important that you get to the question part of the information that you're given, where it tells you what you're going to be required to do. Remember that first question that we did, where we had all those population figures and GDP figures. The table gave us all that information, but we didn't require it in the answering of the question. And often the problem is that these tables are sourced from actual legitimate sources, but there'll be parts that we don't need. Don't be afraid of all the information. Look at the question and then go and answer that question. It's important to ring the words, for example, that are asking you to do things like calculate, or the total, or find the percentage. Those are the words that are telling you what you're going to be doing in terms of the maths. I wish you well in your examinations, and I hope that these questions are going to assist you in preparing well for those finals that are just around the corner.